Um, I must thank you all for having the stamina to have yet another Zoom meeting at 6 p.m. I don't know about you, but it does get the day merges into one. So I'll do some very basic introductions to who I am. I'm Gino Martini. I'm the chief scientist for the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. I'm not a sophisticated Italian. I'm from Liverpool originally. For those who don't know who I am, I'm also an ex-industrial pharmacist. I've worked for GSK, for Shire, for Roche. I've also held the chair in innovation at King's College London for a number of years before taking up this post at the Society. I also deputy chair of the UK Innovation Corridor as well. So I'd like to thank you for being here today. We're talking about, well, effectively building an innovation medtech cluster, particularly in this region. What we're trying to do today is answer a particular question at the very end. You know, or reach a consensus on what does a medtech cluster look like in this region? What are those key ingredients? And what we're going to try and do is have a couple of guest speakers to sort of sow the seeds, put the background, put the framework in place, and have time at the end to have a critical discussion. And this is for me right now to tell you all that we are recording this session, okay? But just tell me a little story about how we got here. This story started 10, 12 years ago when GSK decided to close the site in Harlow, which I live in, by the way. And I used to work there. And likes of Tony Jones, who's the One Nuclear CEO, myself, Julie Houston, who works as a strategic economic development manager at Harlow Council, set up what we call the M11 forum, where we try to talk to people, lay on sessions for people to approach and key talks such as this, to engage in networking and try and really revive the spirits of the town and say, guess what, guys, there's loads of innovation ongoing up and down the M11. And of course, we were all delighted, of course, when Public Health England decided to move to the region. Well, kind of still moving effectively as we speak. And of course, it then made a lot of sense for us to merge with the UK Innovation Corridor guys, with John McGill and Lim, who are here today, because it makes great sense to do that. I would like to acknowledge John McGill, who's Director of UKIP, and our Chair, Anne Lim, who's here, and Dave Burrows, who has a foot in both camps, both with Harlow Council and also Economic Development Advisor for UKIP as well. Without these people, working with myself and Tony, these events wouldn't happen. It takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, and I salute you all for your hard work and efforts. We are passionate about this corridor. We're passionate about the M11 corridor, the A10, whatever. We're passionate about this region. We've got some great entrepreneurs, great innovators here. What can we do? One of the things I'll tell you, as a director of a small company that was making medical devices, it used to frustrate me huge amount to make a device using medical technology in this region, only for it to be made en masse in Ireland. And I felt, what could we do here? And Bill Spriggins, who's here somewhere on this call, often said we should do something about medtech. We should do something about medtech. And guess what? We'll do something about medtech. We're having this forum today. So, basically what we're going to do, we're going to lay the scene, give the foundation. We're going to have Dr. Neil Ebenezer, who joins us from the Department of International Trade as a medical technologist specialist. Seasoned veteran, Neil, if you don't mind me saying, is also ex-MHRA. This is not a discussion about Brexit, by the way. I'll put the forewarning in there now. If you feel we need to do one, then we should do a session on Brexit, because I think we should talk about what do we need for a medtech cluster. And Professor Yvonne Barnett, who I've worked before on REF, and now we're working on REF again. I'm delighted she's come to the region. Yvonne is a Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation at ARU, has been a tour de force in East Midlands in reviving the area in medtech, and secured over £35 million in investment. So, we've got a great champion here who's moved to our corridor. And of course, Darren Clark, who's CEO of Medilink Midlands, and has been in Medilink East Midlands since 2004. And actually, Darren, you may not know, but you were ex-CEO of ex-Pharmaceutical Profiles. And I know that company extremely well, and they were a great innovation company in Nottingham. So that's where we are. So we're going to hand over to Neil, Neil's got 30 minutes, and then we'll hand over to Yvonne and to Darren, 30 minutes, and then we have Q&A at the end. I want to keep the questions to the end so we have this rich conversation that's required. May I also do some housekeeping? If you could go on mute, be great. If we start dipping out with Wi-Fi, if you just switch off your video so we can go forwards. So Neil, I hand over to you, sir, and what I'll do is I'll flash my hand 5 as we're getting towards the end of your time. Okay?
Okay, excellent. Well, hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah, and thank you very much for the kind invitation and also for setting the scene. So pretty much with this talk, I'll try to introduce, because not everybody knows who we are. So say something about DIT, say something about the medtech innovation landscape in the UK, and then hopefully at the end, we can touch on some of the things that are really quite important to your heart around this corridor down the M11. So I work for the Department for International Trade, and we'll run through a few slides on them. And this is pretty much what the Department of International Trade is. Previously, you might have known them as UKTI, or before that, even DTI. But what the Department for International Trade is responsible for and securing UK global prosperity by promoting and financing international trade and investment and championing free trade. So you can see in the post-Brexit arena, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in developing free trade agreements and so forth. And this department is pretty much at the heart of it, working across Whitehall to help deliver for the UK. And I work in what is called the DIT Healthcare, Life Science and Bioeconomy Cluster, and the Medtech support for that is really around this area. And in terms of purpose, as I said, it grew out of Healthcare UK, which is a joint initiative from the Department for International Trade, as well as the Department for Health and Social Care and NHS England and Improvement. So there's a lot of technical know-how and support across the department. As well as having people inside the UK, we have people as part of the FCDO, the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office now. As DFID, the Department for International Development, merged with the FCO. And so there are people in post in a number of countries. So when companies are looking to export their wares, DIT can help in taking people out on missions and so forth. And I'll touch on a few of those now. The other side of what we do is also helping, and this could be really quite important for your corridor, is looking at how can we help bring people into the UK. So looking at what we call foreign direct investment, so FDI. And so we work at both ends of that whole medtech issue. I mean, we do this obviously for all other trades as well, so it's automotive, whatever else, but obviously my focus is very much in the medtech space. And this sort of gives an overview of some of the things I've said. The partnerships inside the UK network, and there's membership and cross-government groups, and One Nucleus will be part of that, I'm sure. There's engagement and influence, and then there's the global network as well. So, we work across the whole spectrum about being able to deliver for the medtech industry. And these are just sort of some of the things taken from the annual report, highlighting the sort of nature of the work they do, sort of, completed 13 inward missions connecting UK organizations with overseas partners, delivered 20,000 supply engagement meetings. We've run a number of missions to different countries and so forth. And, as we look to the future, you can see that the role for international engagement is going to become increasingly important. And so developing these clusters, developing a network of companies in an area, so regions become within the UK, specializing in particular areas, having a USP will become increasingly important because we can use that to sell abroad, but also to get the investment into the UK, into specific areas. And then, that was pretty much the overview of the DIT. And so what I want to talk a little bit about what we mean about the medtech sector, because it covers a multitude of sins when you talk to people. So I thought it might be worth just setting out our stall. So, under the Medical Device Directive, there's a very specific definition of a medical device on the left-hand side, which I won't go into detail now. But really, when I'm talking about medtech, I'm talking around medical devices and diagnostics. So whether it's in vitro or in vivo diagnostics, as well as the software that's linked to both of those, right? All three of them. So these become the medtech opportunities. There is another side that is very allied to this, and that is what they'll term as digital health. And there's often big overlaps between them. And a colleague of mine, Hassan Chowdhury, leads very much on that area. But we've had to create some sort of distinction between these areas of work, and really the software that I will look at will be software that either is a medical device in itself, software as a medical device, or it is part of a device, i.e. a medical device. You can think about implantable cardiac defibrillators and so forth, or it is part of a diagnostic. And this is the area that I sort of cover. And so when we promote the UK abroad, one of the key things is this thing about the unique selling point. Why choose the UK? And these are some of the things that we talk through, and I think would be very, very helpful as you position yourself when you're thinking about what you as a region have to offer. Forward thinking with a track record of scientific breakthroughs, and some have already been mentioned. A partnership working approach between the sector, government, and clinicians. I think this is a key part of it, because the NHS as an entity is something that people overseas find very attractive. And we have a population of 67 million people that seeks the best innovations and solutions from around the world. But it is the way that the different bodies in the UK can come together to work to sort of address certain challenges. And I think the challenges we face from COVID, we have some very good examples coming through about how certain aspects of the healthcare delivery has worked well. And then on the economic side, we're a low-cost competitive market. And when you're looking at the UK, it is one of the most attractive places, according to Forbes and various others, to establish themselves. So this is part of the attraction for that FDI that I mentioned. It has some of the lowest corporation tax rates. Labor costs are very competitive, together with the expertise of a workforce. And then we have a number of tax relief packages, things like patent box, the research and development tax relief, the R&D expenditure credit. So these are all of the things that can attract companies to come into the UK. And it's worth just taking a little look at this. And you can see, it's trying to capture the sort of medtech sector up and down the country. And you can see that, the area that you're interested in here in the east of England is a very, very vibrant place for medical technologies and the development of it. But overall, you can see there's a really good distribution up and down the country with good expertise across the breadth of the UK. It's a significant employer with over 130,000 employees. It has a very large annual turnover. And currently there's a count of around 4,000 businesses in the medtech area. And all of these figures have largely been developed through the Office of Life Sciences. And we can choose a couple of the sort of government-supported initiatives that will help support medtech. So, through the NIHR, there are a number of the MICs, the Medtech and in vitro diagnostic cooperatives, and some of them will specialize very specifically in certain conditions. So yet again, that naturally helps create hubs of expertise in a particular area. And you can see that over 14 million has been awarded to the NIHR's 11 leading medtech and in vitro diagnostic cooperatives. And allied to this, we have the HSNs, the Academic Health Science Networks, and these are centers of excellence. You have a similar approach where you've got the hospitals, the NHS, working with academics as well as industry to help address challenges faced by the populations in specific areas. And yet again, we have HSN based around Cambridge and East Anglia. So, so there are things in your region that you can actually call on as part of your centers of excellence. Another government initiative, which is the Health Data Research Hubs, as data is becoming increasingly important in the delivery of healthcare. There are 7 of these distributed up and down the country, some of them specializing in specific areas. So if you take Birmingham, for instance, we'll have Insight, which is the ophthalmology health data research hub. And so up and down the country, yet again, we have a number of accelerators and incubators, and I'll touch on this later in the talk, but you can see, things like Accelerate Cambridge, Grabraham, things like that in around Cambridge, and of course, there's ones further down in Essex as well. And so some of the key trends affecting the sector, and it might just be worth spending a few minutes talking about this. You can see one of the big drivers for the UK is really an aging population. So we're saying this by 2050, 1 in 6 will be over the age of 65. And yet again, when related to COVID, you can see the impact of certain diseases on an older demographic, an older population. Alongside this thing of an older population, we see a rise in chronic conditions, and the challenges to address those will grow. So there are opportunities for Medtech to help address that. And of course, through the academic network that we have in the UK, there are a number of technological advancements as well as an industry that we can use to exploit to meet some of these challenges. And of course, the emerging market will be addressing this aging demographic, not just for the UK, but globally as well. And what we're seeing is, and this is actually before COVID, a rise in the number of diagnostic companies in the UK that we're growing. And, IVDs is now the largest and one of the fastest growing segments within Medtech. And we're seeing diagnostic imaging and allied software with that growing quite rapidly as well. And so when I talk around the Medtech offer, we often, and I've covered a lot of these already, but it's really trying to look at the UK as a prime location to identify Medtech innovation and to do research, develop and evaluate products and services for the NHS. And what you can really think of together with the NHS and industry and academia, that the UK can provide a test bed for global market development. And with that, we have dedicated infrastructure of the Medtech entities that I've mentioned. We have national agencies working together, for instance, the MHRA, NICE, in terms of the regulation, but the health technology assessments and so forth to aid adoption of some of those technologies. We have a significant commercial sector within various clusters across the UK, and we have strong government commitment through a number of programs like the Grand Challenges and so forth. And so some of the opportunities worth just talking a little bit about. I won't dwell on some of these too much because I think this audience is very knowledgeable, but often what I do is try to talk a little bit around some of the Medtech, some of the different devices we have. And this is really on the right-hand side showing some of the examples of companies that we attracted into the UK to partner and develop products that then can be sold as coming from the UK. And we've given examples here of things in cardiology, in terms of portable heart scanners or 3D imaging. And you can see that the UK turnover of cardiovascular devices in 2017 was a significant number of 626 million and growing. And similarly, we do the same for in vitro diagnostics. There's a number of different types that are being developed. We're seeing increasingly the sort of point of care technologies that are coming through, lateral flow technologies, and the UK is well positioned to exploit these and develop things further. And similarly with diagnostic imaging, but I won't dwell on these too much now. I mean, the one area it might be worth talking a little bit about when you're looking at a USP for your corridor, and that is something around genomics to aid diagnostics. When you think that you have possibly in that same corridor, the Sanger Institute, having sequenced the human genome, having all of that expertise, you can look at how that can actually be drawn through. Genomics England is doing fantastic work in doing this. There's specific areas, so for instance, in oncology, where a genomic diagnosis now is given as a matter of course for some individuals. But you can see that there's a potential for this market to grow quite rapidly. And I think although we use genomics as the exemplar in this, it might be worth looking at some of the other omic technologies, so the metabolomics and so forth. So I think there's huge opportunity, and in your corridor, I think there's some specific expertise that could perhaps be drawn on. And similarly, with the software in Medtech solutions, I've touched on this already. So, you can look at software as standalone software, whether it's AI or software as a medical device. But then you can also look at the software in relation to the in vitro diagnostics, medical devices, imaging, or the omics. And you can see a growing need and demand for this. And yet again, within your corridor, you see some of that expertise in that software development related to medtech. And so one of the things in the talks I give is often around regional strengths, talking for specific areas. I must admit, I need to develop this one a little bit more, and possibly after this, I'll know a lot more around it. So it seems a bit strange telling people from a particular area about their area, but if you bear with me, this is some of the slides at DIT that we tend to use about the East of England. And these are some of the stats I'm sure you're very familiar with around the amount of goods and service exported from the area, the size of the population, as you can see, it's quite significant, and the sort of economy. So this is talking about it in total, so it's not really talking about medtech. But what you're seeing is a very, very vibrant part of the world, and for the UK, especially important. Oops, and I think yet again, just referencing that point, that in this part of the world, you can see the significance that medtech plays. And this is a sort of slide that was taken from another piece of work, where if you're looking at the East of England, sort of core medtech is what they call it at, is, and I must admit, I've lost the measures of these. But in terms of the country, it is a very significant part. I think the southeast of England is the highest, with East of England then being the next largest sector or area for medtech. And then, looking at some of the strengths, so when you're looking at some of the newer technologies, advanced materials and manufacturing, health and life sciences, technology, and, the agri-tech as well. And then you can look at sort of area, you can look at the area around healthcare, life science, and the bioeconomy. And you can see a number of the companies and significant plays in the area that add to the strength that you're trying to create down this corridor. And then lastly, it's looking at East of England in this sort of way of trying to look at some of the industrial networks, the Chesterfield Research Park, the corridor you're talking about. We talk about 37 life science research institutions in this corridor, 1,500 life science businesses. And the ecosystem is very rich. A couple of companies have been pulled out, like Teledyne, ETV, Olympus. And then you've got, what has been mentioned, the government is relocating Public Health England, or whatever it'll be called next, into this area. And often when you're looking at this, and this area around Harlow, I think is going to be a significant site, it is looking at what will be anchor tenants. And so if you have, Public Health England as a public body being there, what else can you attract? And I think that is going to be some of the challenge, and perhaps that'll be part of the discussion you'll have at the end of this talk. Because, you've got the science parks, the Harlow Science Park, the Chesterfield Science Park. You can look at, other accelerators and incubators. And that's really going to attract some of the smaller companies. But what are you going to do to attract that larger company to help really be that anchor, so that you can build something around, the kernel around which, supply chains and other industrial networks then can be part of. And to do that, I think you need to think about your USP and how do you want to pitch this. And I think that is very much, for the area to decide. What government can do is help support you in looking at, once you decide that, is how do you go out abroad? So when we're looking at things like FDI, to be able to sell what you have as a USP for the region abroad is something that DIT can help with. for the companies that you have in your area as they want to grow and scale up, scale out their technologies, look to new markets, this is where we can help. So, the DIT is happy to collaborate, happy to support the regions up and down the country. And my contact details are here as the Medtech specialist. My colleague Hassan Chowdhury does a lot around the digital health area. And Linda McGee is the health innovation specialist with a strong focus on diagnostics. And, please get in touch if there's things that we can do to help. We're happy to do so. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Neil, for that excellent presentation. And actually, you finished 5 minutes ahead of schedule, so I thank you for that. But I suppose, but since you've done that, maybe have one quick question from somebody. If you want to use the put your hand up or put it in the chat box, that might be better. Actually, we can answer the question, or if that works. I'll just give it a second or two. So the chat box is there. If you ask the question, that'd be easy. If not, I do have a question I could ask Neil, but I'll give you one more second. Okay, Neil, since how does Project Defend fit into all this? I mean, it was mentioned in July about trying to wean off imports, particularly highlighted with issues. I mean, can you provide any more information about Project Defend, or is that still a work in progress?
I mean, at the moment, I think I would put it down as a work in progress. I mean, where we sit in government sometimes is a bit more in the periphery than some things that come from the center. These are things that have been talked about, the onshoring of a number of businesses, the strengthening of particular areas. So diagnostics was one that was talked a lot about. I think the challenges of addressing some of these are still to be ironed out. So I think in the coming weeks, months, we'll most probably hear more about it.
Okay. And John McGill, have you got? Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Gina. Neil, I thought that was a really good presentation, and I'm so glad we've got those slides because you shouldn't apologise for telling the locals what their local area looks like, because I learned a lot from that, and probably a lot of it I should know. But the question that I had, and this might lead us into the more general discussion after Yvonne and has given her presentation, is that you mentioned genomics as, if I understood you correctly, as what we might look at in the future. I just wondered, and it's sort of related to your map showing the distribution around the UK of Medtech, what are the particular strengths which we already have in the region, or even in the corridor in Medtech?
So to my mind, I mean, the reason I touch on genomics for your region, I think, grows out of the Sanger Institute. When I used to be a researcher, I collaborated with what was then the Sanger Center. You look at Brabraham, the sort of centers around Addenbrooke's. There's a lot of research that's going on, and actually putting this into utility. So I think, we're seeing the rise of genomics, say, for specifically for single gene disorders. And, that was sort of my background in the past. But, Cambridge largely has been at the forefront of a lot of this work. We're now seeing this applied, and especially the work through Genomics England, through to complex diseases. So oncology is a classic. But now we can look at that and say, well, what does it mean in terms of cardiovascular disease and so forth? So I think there's where previously we might have used this in terms of just trying to better understand the disease. Now we can actually say something about treatment modalities. So you can actually look at this whole point that you can see the driver towards, and I don't particularly like it, but precision medicines, personalizing of healthcare delivery. I mean, that is where the future is going to lie. And I think that is the key to it. So if you as a region can link into that or lead that creates a USP, because what is going to be differentiator for you, and I think you've got to think about this not as saying compared to, say, the Northern Powerhouse. You've got to say compared to, say, Boston. right? Or San Francisco, wherever it might be. It's a global network. And we are trying to sell the UK abroad based on this expertise that we have. And we have it in depth, but sometimes those linkages aren't perhaps as well made as they might be.
Thank you, Neil. And thank you, John, for the question. And like I said, at the end, when we do have questions, you can use the chat box or you can use the reaction and put your hand up. I see a question there from Chris Cup, but we'll come to that towards the end. Thank you, Chris, for that observation. So without further ado, I'll hand over now to Professor Yvonne Barnett and to Darren Clark. The floor is yours. And like I said, if you're not speaking, I now hand over. Sorry, was I on mute then? I do apologise. Thank you for that answer to the question. Thank you for the question, John, and thank you, Chris, for putting the narrative there, the feedback in the question in the comments box. So, without any further ado, I'll hand over now to Professor Yvonne Barnett and to Darren Clark. Thank you.
Thank you, Gino. Darren, are you able to share the presentation? I'm just having some issues at my end here. Sorry, apologies, everyone. Let's put Darren on the spot.
Have we lost Darren by any chance?
No, he's here.
No, I'm still here. I hopefully can share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, if you can, you start at the beginning, please, Darren.
I will just get it to the beginning.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is that okay?
That's great. If you can click through, that will be great. I'll give you a prompt. So it's lovely to see everyone here and to see the level of interest at this time of the day, certainly in the relation to the topic of this evening's discussion. So as Gina's already said, I've worked up until fairly recently in the Midlands for about 15 years at Nottingham Trent University predominantly, but working with a number of private sector organisations, including now Medilink Midlands, but also up until recently I was a non-executive director of BioCity Group Limited. And Neil, it was great to see that the MediCity element of BioCity Group was mentioned on one of your slides. So thank you very much, Neil, for setting that excellent context. So in terms of this evening, just wanted to thank everyone for the very warm welcome thus far into the innovation corridor. And it's really supported my transition and my induction into what I think is a really exciting environment, and look forward very much myself personally, but also the organisation that I work for, Anglia Ruskin University, for the opportunity that we have to contribute to realising the vision around medtech and beyond that, indeed many other sectors. So I think the exam question for Darren and I this evening really was to really try and begin to highlight and tantalise what we think the contribution of Anglia Ruskin University individually, but also collectively, not least of all with Medilink Midlands and many players around this table this evening, what our contribution would be to the development of a world-class medtech sector in the innovation corridor. So if you could go on to the next slide, please, Darren. So just a little bit about Anglia Ruskin University. That's the second one, Darren, please. Just click on it. That's it. Perfect.
It's showing as a slide presentation, but I'm on the screen, unfortunately.
That's okay. So Anglia Ruskin University is a globally connected university. We have got connections with 185 different countries in the world. It is in the top 350 universities in the Times Higher Education World Rankings. So we do have that very significant global connection. We have got physical campuses in Cambridge, in Chelmsford, We work in partnership with partners in London for ARU London, and also colleagues will be aware that we have been appointed by the CPCA as the academic partner for the University of Peterborough development. So with 2,500 staff and 31,000 students based across our campuses. We very much work under the premises of being an anchor institution in the Eastern region. We want to work in partnership to support through everything we do around research, knowledge exchange, and innovation to support society, culture, and the economy. And that's how we define our role as an anchor institution. Next slide, please, Darren. We are a teaching intensive but research active university. We are multidisciplinary in terms of the faculties that we support and that delivers the education, the research, the impact activities that we undertake. We are, by way of education, the largest provider of nursing, midwifery, health and social care provision in England. And we have a very significant role nationally as one of the leading universities in degree level apprenticeships. So no doubt later on in the discussions, we'll talk about skills and attributes that we need to support a high growth medtech sector. And I think we mustn't forget that. And we're certainly primed and able to contribute significantly to this. We do focus on those areas and invest heavily in those areas for which we've got demonstrable world leading expertise. And these for us are three main themes: health, performance and well-being, which is obviously very pertinent to this evening's discussion, sustainable futures, and safe and inclusive communities. In fact, some of the work that we're doing with colleagues in Harlow is very much based around the safe and inclusive communities work. So I just want to focus now really on the health, performance and well-being aspects of what we do and the key attributes that we bring to this evening's discussions. Darren, next slide, please. Thank you. So across our campuses, we've got a significant number of infrastructural assets, academic talent, and other activities to support not just education, skills development, but also research and its commercialization in the form of spin-out companies, licensing, and other aspects around health, performance, and well-being. We work very closely in partnership, and again, that's the approach we want to take from this evening, and have significant funding from a whole range of diverse funders, all of whom are focusing in and around this health, performance and well-being sector for us. We have really consolidated in the last 18 months our approach and our commitment to working in this sector. And it's important that we continue to work with others to build and to continue our investment in new talent, new infrastructure, and new ways of supporting that cultural and that economic support to the region. Next slide, please, Darren. So we're joined this evening by Professor Selim Selik, who is the current director of the ARU Medical Technology Research Centre. So just to give a bit of a plug for what he and his colleagues are doing, there are 5 main platforms of activities, some of which Neil has already alluded to in his presentation around medical device development, molecular diagnostics in line with the comments made earlier, and other key aspects around biomechanics, pharmaceutical researchers as well, and very importantly, drug discovery. So any further questions on any of the detail of that, I'm sure Selim will be pleased to talk about the work that he does. So in line, next slide please, Darren, in line with our commitment to go beyond the education and skills, but to make sure that we are developing innovations and impact, support the activities that we do around all our research themes, including health, performance and well-being. We want to make sure that we provide the sort of spaces in collaboration to both enable our own academic staff and our research staff to spin out and create real economic value through the spin-out activities and the partnership working we do, but also we want to be seen as an organisation that works collaboratively to support and provide the right sorts of infrastructure and environment to attract and support innovators to develop high growth companies in the sectors where we have got our expertise. We work very, very closely with the residents and with the clients in our Innovation Centre. And this evening, Fiona Bodle, one of my colleagues who is currently overseeing the Arise Innovation Centres, we have two, one based currently at Chelmsford and also one in Harlow at the Science Park. So Fiona Bodle currently oversees the operations of these two innovation centres, and now in the last 12 months have become very much focused again on accommodation to support SME and economic development around health performance and well-being, which very much includes the medical technologies sector. We're about to go out live, so it is a bit of a plug given that we've got such a big audience tonight. We're about to go out to advertisement for a director of both of the innovation centres. So if that's something that is of any interest to colleagues here tonight, we would be delighted to hear from you, and contact details will be provided by David and colleagues, I no doubt, after this. So next slide, Darren, is just to give a bird's eye view of you know, the Innovation Centre at Harlow, which is very much open for business, and we have currently two occupiers at that site there. So in terms of not just continue to support the development of our research, enabling our academics to spin out into that wider economic and business community, we feel it's really important to work with other partners to support the innovations and the impact that those innovations can create. So the next slide really just highlights, and we can go on now, that we have had an association since its beginning in 2016 for the first NHS England Clinical Entrepreneurship Scheme. So that's been a very significant development. It is the world's first and largest national level workforce development programme for clinical entrepreneurs. It has developed and evolved as the programme has run out. Darren, next slide, please. And of course, the main driver is to provide support for a whole range of clinicians in practice who see the opportunity to develop further the sorts of innovations, the sorts of business processes, the sorts of techniques at their fingertips to help them support and bring real patient benefit. So this programme has been very, very attractive to a whole range of clinicians across England. Next slide, please. And if you follow the trajectory from its launch in 2016, it was very much medical doctor focused, to the tranche in 1920, where there were over 150 new recruits right across the whole gambit of healthcare professionals. So it has been a very successful programme. In total, 511 clinical practitioners have been associated with it and have gone through that programme. So what has it led to? And that's the next slide. So I think really importantly for this evening's context, there have been 175 startups have been created. There's been real wealth and added value from significant investments in those startups, which have grown out. They've created real impact in terms of bringing patient benefit, and they have been adopted, many of these innovations, across the National Health Service network. And Polly Sullivan, who's with us in the audience this evening, has been a key project lead and project manager as part of this programme. So kind of what next? Well, when I came into the Innovation Corridor and I met Professor Tony Young, whom I know a number of you already know, I was really very interested in how we as an organisation, Anglia Ruskin, could work much more powerfully and at stronger leadership level to support the ambitions around these clinical entrepreneurs and to develop the sort of medical technology innovations that will be adopted, will be applied, and that we can support in Anglia Ruskin in terms of the research and development activities that we undertake. So we have led now an application at a much larger scale in very strong collaboration with local NHS partners, particularly in Mid and South Essex Health and Care Partnership, but a range of other NHS partners throughout England. Various industry players, including Medilink Midlands, and a whole range of other academic partners, both in the UK and internationally. There's a whole range of other assets that we've learned or lessons from phase 1 around legal, financial, third sector, and obviously the local LGC Limited also, they have supported the bid that we've developed. I'm really pleased to say that after a nationally very competitive open procurement process, we have been awarded the contract, and we're now just going through the first details of that. This will represent, it's not a closed shop. The consortium that we have brought together is not a closed shop. We know already that a very significant demand, a real latent potential, and many, many more clinical entrepreneurs who are ready engaging with us to be the next cohort. And we will start almost immediately. We sign the contract, we will start imminently this program. And even from the last year, we have got many more clinicians lined up for this. And I would like to think, and my provocation to us this evening is, how can we keep that collaborative partnership growing? How can we develop it on a global scale, linking elsewhere, providing the sorts of innovations and insights that will create new company growth in our area, in this innovation corridor? How can we be attractive? How can we provide the right conditions to enable that to happen? And who else wants to join to support and realise the ambitions of this new partnership? So hopefully that gives you a sense how now we've taken a really key step forward, and much more joined up in terms of the assets, the knowledge, the expertise, and the ambition that we have at Anglia Ruskin to work very much in partnership with many of the organisations around the table this evening. And we look forward to the discussions at the end around this and how we can build on those relationships going forward. I'd like to hand over now to Darren, and thank you very much for driving those slides for me, Darren.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. I think I've managed to sort out the slides just about. What Yvonne didn't say in there is that Yvonne's actually been a long-standing member of the Medilink East Midlands board, and now on the Medilink Midlands board. So Yvonne asked me if I could join in and do a joint presentation with her. I guess my approach to answering the exam question is to give a bit of an overview of Medilink Midlands as a bit of an example of an organisation that supports a cluster in our region. And hopefully that will give a bit of an idea and a feel for what could be done in the East. So starting point for this is, for those people that don't know Medilinks at all, we're a not-for-profit membership organisation. And really our purpose and our main focus is to bring together like-minded organisations who share a passion for life sciences, really to help this industry and this sector to grow. So across the Midlands, we have a network of about 1,500 organisations, of which 232 are members. Now in the East Midlands, particularly when Medilink started in 2004, we actually spanned across medical technology, biosciences, so biotech and pharmaceuticals, really because that was the makeup of the sector in our region, and there wasn't any other organisation there supporting any of those sectors. However, having said that, Medtech has always been the largest part of that, and it's the common part of what a Medilink is. That's their focus. So for us in the Midlands, over 50% of the companies in our community and in our membership are Medtech companies. So whilst we do have pharma and biotech, they make up a relatively small proportion of that. And another key element of this is, as well as the companies, is to have the engagement and interaction with both the universities and NHS. The other side of it is what sort of companies do we support? So I guess this is sort of the contrast to what Neil was saying about having your large anchor tenants. Medilink has always really been about supporting the smaller companies, and our membership is dominated by SMEs and significantly by the micro and small businesses. So whilst we do have some larger organisations as part of the community, our focus is primarily on those smaller businesses and how we can help and support them. The region we cover, so as Medilink Midlands, this is a recent amalgamation within the last year of Medilinks in the West Midlands and the East Midlands. So we now cover a region spanning from the Welsh borders in the west through to the coast in the east. So we border on to the east of England in Lincolnshire, Northamptonshire and Rutland, and we actually overlap in Bedfordshire in some of the activity and the support. So we really are the region right next to the east of England. We are part of a national network called Medilink UK, which is essentially a federation of regional organisations. So we're all separate businesses in our own rights, but we come together as a collective where there's a value in supporting that entire life science community, and particularly the Medtech community. The slide should probably actually say it's close to 3 decades of providing support. The original Medilink in Yorkshire and Humber is approaching 30 years old in the next couple of years. And as a collective, we actually form the largest healthcare representative body in the country with over 1,500 members. Medilink East Midlands and West Midlands are actually 2 of the founding members of Medilink UK. As was actually Medilink East. But what you will notice on the map here, whilst we have 8 regional offices and we cover a majority of the country, there is a obvious omission at the moment, which is the east of England. So there was a Medilink 10 or so years ago in the east for various reasons. I think that didn't continue, but it's a clear opportunity, a clear omission from that network at the moment. So what do we do? Well, really, Medilink's main role is to act as a facilitator and a coordinator, and we always talk about sitting at the centre of a ABC network, so an academic, business and clinical community, but coming very much from the business community angle of this, and it's really about how do we connect our businesses up to help those businesses develop and grow. So businesses, so on this slide I've really indicated the sort of cluster organisations or network organisations. So Midlands Engine is the sort of primary activity equivalent of the Northern Powerhouse, but that segment there would also include all of our companies and our businesses, and a key activity is for us to connect those businesses together, but equally linking those businesses through to the academic base, and that's really done at 3 levels. So the pan-institutional level, so through the MI Health network and the Enterprise University network, which is the community of universities working together. Also at institutional level, so with each of the universities, but probably most importantly for us is with particular centres or initiatives within those universities. So for example, the Centre for Health Technology at University of Nottingham and the Life Science Accelerator in Leicester. And probably most importantly to us now is the newest one of these, which is the Medical Technology Innovation Facility based out of Nottingham Trent University, which Yvonne had a very large hand in helping to get off the ground. That's a very exciting new facility for us in the region, with a very specific focus on medical technology, and really set up to support businesses, particularly those SMEs, to develop the new technologies. Likewise, from a clinical point of view, again, we work across that range. So from Midlands Health Alliance, so the collaboration of all the regional trusts, through to the academic health science networks and individual trusts. But again, probably more importantly, it's with particular departments or initiatives. So for example, the Centre for Healthcare Equipment and Technology Adoption, or CHEETA, which is based out of Nottingham University Hospitals. They are actually a partner in some of the projects and programs that we deliver, but also, so I sit on the advisory board for them, and they're providing some very specific services to SMEs from anywhere in the country, actually, but our is the local feed of companies into their activity. Likewise, the Derby Clinical Trial Support Unit, which has always had a bit of a focus on doing device trials and evaluations. We work very closely with them. So how do we do what we do? How do we go about doing that connection? So the first point of it is the sector-specific advice and guidance. So we essentially see ourselves as a specialist service that now sits under the local growth hubs. Previously as sat under or worked alongside the Business Link programme. So it's those more generic business support activities, and Medilink providing some very specific help and support services. A lot of that is focused around innovation and how we help our companies bring new products, how they help them develop them, and how we help them bring them to market. But it also then market access. So in the UK, that's driven by the NHS and how the companies can interact and engage with the NHS and ultimately sell their products into the NHS. But then also looking at international markets, which is where we would then start working with the likes of DIT to support that. And supply chain. So you may have seen from one of the earlier slides that supply chain is quite a significant part of this sector, and it is quite a disparate and diverse supply chain in. So a key thing is how you connect that up. We also do a lot of signposting to opportunities and funding, and as part of the facilitation role, we do that, making introductions and connecting up. As well as that, we actually provide some funding ourselves, so through grant funding programs to help support companies in pre-market activities. So the first part of that is an innovation support fund, which helps SMEs to procure external suppliers. Anything from initial idea and concept, so that could be around patent market analysis, through design, prototyping, right up to the point that they're actually ready to sell their product. A component of that is supporting them to undertake their medical technology trials, so to get clinical evaluation of their products. And then the last area of grant funding is really around helping them to establish new connections and collaborations to take innovations forward. So that's a specialist networking grant. And then lastly, we deliver a wide program of events, ranging from networking events through to specific training activities. Typically, switching to virtual, we were doing 30 to 40 events a year. Now, in the last year, that's around about 150 events I think we've delivered. So we've doing 3 or 4 events a week. Again, different areas that those events focus on. One particularly is around creating special interest groups around themed topics, where we're trying to bring the local community together who share a common interest, and helping them to develop collaborations and take their projects and activities forwards. We also undertake technology collaboration workshops, which is really more focused on those collaborations and how can we take specific projects forwards. We used to have a pot of funding to do that we had access to. In the last few years, we haven't had that, so it's directing them towards the other sources of funding that might be available once there's an interesting collaboration established. And then professional development, again, is a key thing. So these are sector-specific programs of helping to upskill and train our sector. So, for example, around regulation is a key topic at the moment, helping them understand what the UKCA mark is, how that will work, how that fits in with CE marking, undertaking their technical files, etc. Another key area for us has been around clinical trials and how to undertake a clinical trial, clinical evaluation for a product or a device. And then lastly, working with our AHSNs, helping companies understand the NHS from a innovation support point of view, but also from them being a market and an ultimate end user for a significant number of the products. So how do we actually fund ourselves as an organisation in these activities? Well, the majority of it actually comes from public sector funding, and for us at the moment, the significant part of that is from European funding. So we actually have 3 innovation-focused ERDF projects running at the moment that support across different parts of the region. But in addition to that, we have contracts with both the East Midlands and the West Midlands AHSN for delivering specific business support services that help them achieve their overall targets and requirements for supporting local businesses. And then we undertake some private sector activity, I guess. So that's providing some specific consultancy and project management support and services to our network and to our members particularly. And then actually membership makes up a relatively small proportion of our overall income, but is a very important component to demonstrate the value of our community and our network and the activities we're undertaking. And then lastly, we have sponsorship for specific activities that we undertake. For example, some of our larger events for the awards programs that we put on. So what's that achieved? So over the last 6 to 7 years, we've helped secure over 10 million of funding, European funding into the region, into the sector to support innovation development. We supported over 1,000 businesses. Whilst we don't measure all of the jobs created, we know there's well over 500 that have been created or safeguarded through the support we've provided. It's brought more than 70, or it's created more than 70 new collaborations with academic institutes, and we know there's over 200 new products been brought to market through that support. And there's some images there just of a number of the ones that we've supported. I am conscious of time, so I will finish off pretty quickly, but I just wanted to give a couple of examples of companies that we've worked with. So Shawporce Medical is more of a typical, what people would consider medtech, and a spin out from Nottingham University, who have a fetal heart, newborn heart rate monitoring system. Giving them a whole range of support from grant funding through helping them to make connections, helping them with new hires and upskilling and training, which has resulted in their product coming onto the European market, receiving FDA, or in the process of getting FDA approval, and helped them go on to secure private sector funding. The second company is a slightly different one in that they provide healthcare services as well as the products and technologies. And this is a growing area that we're seeing where companies are combining their technology with healthcare delivery support services. So this is a digital platform. Spirit Health have grown significantly in the last few years. They have a digital healthcare platform called CliniTouch, which has been used for treating diabetes for a while now. They're now moving into looking at that, its utilisation in COPD. And again, various bits of help that we provided over the last few years, which has seen the company grow quite significantly, so from 20 employees to more than 130, and supporting, so delivering a number of GP practices locally, but also supporting significant number of CCGs. So really my last slide comes back to what's the opportunity from East of England, and this is slicing some of the data that Neil showed earlier in a slightly different way. And I mean, what I would say is, from a UK point of view, medical technology, medical devices makes up a significant part of the life science sector and life science industry. So there are actually more businesses in medical technology in the supply chain than there are in the biotech pharma industry, between them, they employ about the same number of people. There is a difference when you start to look at turnover, and the medtech sector isn't as significant a contributor as biotech pharma, but nevertheless an important component in that. And if you look at medtech and supply in the east of England, with the Midlands as a combined region, then it's actually the fourth largest. So there is a significant community and a significant number of businesses that deserve the help and support to develop further. And I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Darren. Thank you, Yvonne, for a great presentation. And congratulations, ARU, the Clinical Entrepreneurship Scheme, which I think I've mentored one or two pharmacists in the past, actually. So it's a great scheme and great to see. Okay, so we're now, and this is the exciting bit. This is where I don't do talking and you guys do some talking, and we have an exchange of knowledge and views. And really, again, just remind you of the ask is that to gain a consensus of what the medtech cluster would look like. What's the ingredients for success? I think we've seen some ideas. So really, I will put some views in the chat box, or put your hand up, and we'll ask you to give some comments. And if not, I'll pick on somebody. How about that? And I think Bill knows I'll be picking on him because he's the guy who always. Well, actually, Bill, I'll pick on you anyway. So, can you share some of your views about medtech cluster and what your vision would look like for this region? You're on mute.
You talk about a medtech cluster, and I'm not convinced about this concept, I must say. And it may be, it may be a difficult thing to say, but certainly from my experience with the original Medilink East, which, bear in mind, that started in about, I can't remember when, 1995, and went through till 2005. We probably had across the region, the 6 counties, maybe 400 to 500, what you would describe as medtechs. Now, in terms of clustering, there were quite small clusters, mini clusters around, if you like. Around Olympus, there was a surgical instrument mini cluster, and there were 1 or 2 others. But I think you have to be careful to start off with the concept that medtechs have to cluster. They're not like biotech drug discovery companies. They don't need that common support. They don't need the venture capitalists down the road. They don't need these things. In my experience, and that I also work with UK trade and investment, so I used to meet a lot of these companies. Many of them are obviously relatively small. They're often lifestyle companies. They're often family businesses. So in my view, I think what we're looking to do is kind of, Darren has really been doing it really well. What the network needs to do is to offer solutions. And there used to be an organization called Business Link, and it was the one-stop shop for business support. And I think you can see what Medilink Midlands is doing is offering that type of service. So a medtech company knows that if it goes to Medilink Midlands or Medilink Yorkshire and Humberside with a problem, they will either get it solved there and then, or they will get signposted to help. And my feeling is that that's what we should be really aiming to achieve, to act as a business support organization. But I'm just concerned that to believe that the way you do this is to almost force small medtechs to cluster together may not be the right policy. I think some of them will enjoy that, particularly those that are on the cusp of being diagnostics or genomics or whatever. But if you're a device company, quite often it doesn't really matter where you do that, where you do the development, where you do the engineering. You don't need a wet lab. And so I just think we have to be a little bit careful about trying to almost force this into a cluster rather than simply offering a business support network for medtechs.
Okay, so cluster, maybe perhaps an ecosystem which is fluid.
That's a better word.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and I use that word because Martina Picardo, who's now online, used to use that all the time. So I stand corrected. but you know, it's interesting. Before this meeting, Julie Houston actually listed all the companies in Hull that had a medtech angle. I was actually quite surprised. I mean, I've lived here for 25 years almost, and there's actually a lot more than you think. And actually, having that concierge service that links groups is actually quite an interesting concept, and probably has some legs. I noticed there's some questions have just popped in. I know. So Dave Russell Graham, hello Dave, hope you're well. Medilink Midlands has a very high percentage of public funding. Where's the money come from in this region? I don't know, Yvonne, if you'd like, because you've got a great track record of bringing in funding. What's your view?
Good question. No, it is a very interesting question. I mean, we're obviously looking at it from a Medilink Midlands board point of view. It's about continuity. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to think really carefully and lobby now at this particular time, and the likes of UKRI and other agencies are thinking about, well, what next around the building, back Britain, what the local levelling up agenda could be. And I think I was with Ottoline Lisa just over a week ago. The Alliance Group of Universities had a conversation with her, and I was really trying to understand her positioning on the opportunity to lever in at one time a whole variety of funding, but with a common purpose. Because I think what we've seen, and it's part of the response we've kind of done in the Midlands as well, where there's been an opportunity quite often to, secure a major investment, but often it's not been holistic in the way it's attached and engaged a range of other players. It's that business, sort of government, industry, academia, the four-legged helix, as it were. So I think there's a real opportunity to think about how we can work together with funds that various agencies can themselves bring in, but it's with that one common purpose in mind, and I really like this notion of an ecosystem for all the reasons why Bill described what he knows much better, this local geography. So I think we've got to look out for it. I think there's going to be opportunities clearly as we understand what we can reach into through Europe as well. So that hasn't entirely gone away, but in some shape or form it has. So we want to think about if it's an SME environment. Clearly, the route we've taken in Medilink Midlands is not to make it expensive for members to be part of the value add we can bring, but it may be that we need to flip that model. It just depends to see the level of our ambition and who we can lobby. There's a whole range of colleagues around this table tonight that are in those sorts of positions, and some of whom have spoken already this evening.
Yeah, Yvonne, and actually, Neil, I'm just looking at you. Perhaps you want to just comment on that, because it's about public funding. Do you have a particular view?
So, I've been listening quite closely to what's been said, and I think Yvonne's comment on, the Build Back Better scheme was that the council has met, I think it was last week, and you've got representatives there from GSK, Syncona, and others. So you've got that feeding into the council from the sort of healthcare or life sciences space. So I think, to talk to people who are on those councils, who can be part of the decision making, will be quite crucial for your project, if I put it that way. I think the other side of it is the bits that I was tapping into when I talked about, continued government support. So if you're looking at the grand challenges, so a lot of my talk focused on, say, the issue around healthy aging. But alongside that, you have AI and data. There's a number of these sorts of programs where there's, multi-million pound funding over a number of years. And then, of course, UKRI has been mentioned through Innovate UK, biocatalyst programs, and various things of that nature. Touching on the issue of what Horizons Europe, the son of Horizon 2020, might look like, and how we as an associate member country can play, I think that is still in the offing. We're not quite sure how that's going to look. So in the near term, perhaps that's not the one to bank on, but it's one to keep in mind. And exactly as Darren's talk, they've obviously been very successful in European funding, which we know is notoriously difficult to get because hit rates tend to be low. but that works well because of collaborative links. And I think one of the things I would emphasize is maintaining collaborative links, especially at the academic level. So I think all of that will help your region be able to exploit the talent it has.
Thank you, Neil. And I know, Darren Clark, you've already answered the question from Chris Cook about does Medilink have connections with Health Enterprise East? And you've answered yes, you worked with them previously and been members for several years, so that's fine. I think the next question by Louise Jopling is a very interesting one. I have my own views, which I'll share. But what is different today in the east of England compared to the regions of the previous Medilink East that disappeared? So what's different now? Anyone would like to put there? Yeah, well, Yvonne, I'll picked on you already, I suppose. Well, Neil, you already talked about it. Perhaps maybe I can hand this over to John McGill. Perhaps if you're on, John. If not, I could put some views down.
Thanks, Gino. Actually, I don't mean thanks. That's the most poisonous chalice I've been handed in many a long while. I mean, there's so much in this conversation that I'm completely unqualified, and that's probably about as good as any. And sorry, just to sort of get to the point, I've really got no reference point about what it looked like 10 years ago. So I think there's others in the room. I mean, I'd suggest colleagues like Bill Spriggins would answer that far better than me. But I just wanted to sort of make a comment on what Neil said in terms of this collaboration. I used to, for my sins, sit on the GLA European Funding Advisory Committee. I mean, sort of a few years ago now, and I think that point he makes, that collaboration between business and academia, particularly, is and if you then in my experience, if you then match that with a body that's got a track record of delivery, and dare I say, in those days, I'm sure it's still true today, and part of that delivery was actually spending European money, because it's got so many obstacles in the way. But the track record of delivering business success, I think he's very powerful. And I'm sort of picking up Yvonne's point. That, I think, is where we can work together more collaboratively, and not to disagree with Bill, far from it. Whether it's cluster or ecosystem, frankly, I wouldn't get too hung up on. But coming together of that business, academia, where we can play a role in convening, I think we're very happy to try and do that. But the expertise that's in this virtual room and more that we could perhaps bring in, I think is our best, is a good starting position. But to go back to your original question, Gino, I really don't know enough about what the landscape looked like 10 years ago to be able to comment on why it's better today.
Yeah, well, I might hand over to Anne. Anne, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Gino, and thank you, John. Let me just build on what John said. I'm the independent business chair of the Innovation Corridor, and so obviously work with John. I think it's a great question. My answer would be, again, from a position of complete ignorance of what happened in the past, which can be a useful teacher for the future. But sometimes maybe what happened in the past happened, and then you have a different starting point and you move forward. And that's kind of where I am with this now. So what's different is we're in a post-Brexit, well, not post-COVID world, but a very different world. And we have a different government in the UK that's likely to be here, in as much as you can ever predict things, for the at least until 2024. That's a government that has an emphasis, amongst much else, thrown into highlight by the pandemic, an emphasis on Britain being a global scientific superpower. So I think there's a wider strategic context and a set of political and economic conditions that are different. The second thing that's different is that whatever goes on in the Northern Powerhouse or the Midlands Engine is entirely up to them. But actually the voice of the East, and you can still see from Neil's excellent presentation that government officials still think in terms of the old government office regions, regardless of whether we organise ourselves like that. The East of England is an entity in their heads. And so actually accepting that and flexing that to suit our individual institutions or businesses or partnerships or local enterprise partnership arrangements, or wherever we individually come from, we have to, I think about how you make that work. And again, what's different for me is that the voice of the East of England is gathering a little bit of pace at the moment, coordinated through the East of England Local Government Association, another kind of coordinating body. But it's finding a purpose, a wider context to bring people together. And then my final point is that. I won't make a political point. You can either choose to cooperate and collaborate, or you can choose to compete, can't you? And I actually think that innovation has been proved to be able to be accelerated where a working paradigm of openness, trust, collaboration, partnership, agility has absolutely been world beating, or else we wouldn't have got where we are with either Pfizer or AstraZeneca. I speak as one who's had my first jab, so I'm feeling great. Sorry, I will shut up now. But actually, seriously, underneath all of that, I think there's a context here. Could I just add a final thing? Because I'm honestly a bystander to this, but I'm somebody who wants to help make this happen. I see in the little boxes here in the names, even though I don't know all of you, but what I've heard and see are leaders. And it just needs great leaders from academic institutions like Yvonne, from government officials like Neil, from key scientific and private sector people. It just needs those people to kind of come together with a shared purpose and to lead, and great things happen. Sorry, I've always been a Pollyanna, but I really, really believe that. So that, for me, that is an answer to whoever asked that question. I'm sorry, was it, I forget who it was, Gino, but I've said enough. That's the reason why I think this is a really good thing. John and I would just like to help move it along, as John said. I'm probably getting a text from him now saying, shut up, Anne, so I will.
That was Louise Jopling's question. I think Louise as well. I mean, I've like I said, I've lived here for over 25 years, and I live in this town as well. But we can't ignore the expansion that has been Cambridge, and the huge expansion of SMEs, entrepreneurs on our doorstep just is clear to be seen. And if the Oxford Arc kicks in, which is going to happen, then we're linking two great institutes together as well. And of course, you've got the overspill from all the great London universities. So I think that's changed. I think that's been quite dramatic. I think Cambridge in particular, what's unfolded in the last 5 years has been remarkable, and it will drive innovation. It will drive that need. So I feel that's been a big difference as well. And again, I think some of the work that's gone on that built it in the bike cluster, or the old science park in Hatfield, the Stevenage Bioscience Catalyst Centres has also helped. We're now talking about catalysm, innovation, the work that Martino did, Sound for Cyprus doing. We've kind of developed that mindset, that culture. It does seem to be it's happening all the time, and the great work we're doing UKIP as well. So I think I've seen these changes happen over the last 10 years, and it's been remarkable, and that's great. To me, it's all about mindset. And if you're willing to collaborate, which Dave has said, and Anna has said, I think great things will happen. I really do.
Sorry, could I come in?
Yeah,
with
sure.
That? Just a
Go
bit
ahead.
of a challenge to this grouping. I've actually worked across sectors. So I've actually worked in transport as well for a time, but just a short time. And it might be worth actually this region taking a look at how others might have done it. And what I would point you to is, say, something like the driverless cars. So if you looked at, say, something like Milton Keynes or Bristol as two centers, they didn't quite take, and forgive me, Anne, for, just badging it in this way, but build it and they will come. They actually went out, they were very forward looking, they engaged, they had an offer. And then when the funding was around, it came to these areas because they were able to deliver the test beds. And that would be my challenge to you as a region, is that there are lots of regions, and Anne is right, bureaucrats in London will look and say, these regions have existed for X number of years. And people like the Northern Powerhouse have attracted that share because they managed to get together, link together, and they could speak to government almost with one voice. You've got to try to demonstrate for your area, your region, this corridor, what is your USP? Can you create the test bed for whatever the new technology is going to be? And you have the HSNs on your doorstep, you have the integration that you've talked about. But does that come together as something that you can pitch to a bureaucrat? Because they're kind of spoiled for choice about where they will go. So there's something around there, I think, that does need to come out. That's something that's coherent. And at the moment, I'm not hearing it. That would be the challenge for me. I think you have all the pieces together, but it's not coming together as one entity. I'll keep quiet now.
Yeah, I think that's a fair challenge, and I think my only proviso to what you're saying is I think COVID-19 has really disrupted and shown that actually we as a nation rely too heavily on imports. As chief scientist, I unfortunately had the unfortunate position to see a number of things, weaknesses in our response to COVID-19, like lateral testing, diagnostics, reuse of medicines, by the way, because we had to. And I think I think those forces, as part of Project Defend, will shape the need for us really, because we cannot go back to being reliant on imports. And I think that's going to be a big driver. Change, necessity will do. But your challenge is well taken. And people are beginning to leave. We're now approaching 7:30. I think this has been a great conversation. We recorded it, and I think what I'd like to do is bring the meeting to an end, and just to highlight to you all that we do welcome questions. We do welcome subjects for us to discuss. This topic will not go away. This topic will be our foundation going forward, because we do believe in medtech, we do believe in innovation, and we do believe in solving unmet medical need. We do believe that there is the competence, the expertise here, but also, what Medilink have done in the Midlands have been amazing, and we will try and emulate best as we can and cooperate. I think is a very important point, Darren. We will cooperate and we will collaborate, because this is what we need in the UK is that cooperation up and down the spine of the UK, and I think that's important. So before I leave, David Burrows, do you want to just put up the programme quickly? If you think there's some ideas for presentations or further seminars are needed, do please email us. But this is some ideas of what we're going to talk about in the next couple of proposed seminars. Some are actually in the making, but we really would love your feedback on this list. Try and make it something that everybody wants to be part of. And if something's missing, do let us know. Like, we've obviously got something on skills, talent, something on funding potentially, attracting. How do we attract a medtech major? We talk about Olympus in Chelmsford. Can we get another one here in the region to really help us? Medtronic, yeah. Could we get a Medtronic here?
They're here in Watford.
Yeah. Well, you have one, yes, in Watford, but could we get more?
Sure.
Why is it everything goes over to Ireland? Why can't we compete? And Bill, I've been there. A lot of the work that I did went to Ireland. So what can we do, to attract that the talent and those big players to come? Okay. So please email us if we've missed out a topic that you think we should be talking about. I suppose like Brexit, perhaps. Do let us know. And it is now 7:30, and I would just like to thank all our speakers, to Neil, to Yvonne, and to Darren. Thank you so much. I know it's hard. You know, it's a long day and yet another Zoom meeting. But your participation has been remarkable. We've had over 40 attendees. Thank you so much. And do give us some feedback, and stay safe and look after yourselves.